take the free gas and fill it all the way up. That's an order from your HOA president.
This bleach blonde BMW Karen storms up at the Shell pump, waving her black card like I'm her personal charity case. Diesel fumes choking the autumn air, fake lashes fluttering, designer yoga pants radiating pure entitlement after I just worked a brutal shift. I calmly swipe my own card.
Ma'am, I pay my own way.
She goes nuclear, shrieking like a banshee, fake crying, phone out. 911, this violent thug is threatening me. He's refusing my charity. Siren screaming. 3 cruisers screech in. My radio crackles. All units, domestic disturbance at Shell Station. I watch officers surround us, knowing exactly what's about to happen. The HOA tyrant had no clue she just called the police. On her own chief. The look on her face when she realized? Priceless. What would you do if your HOA Karen tried to arrest her own boss? Drop your location plus your worst HOA story. Let me back up and tell you how the most powerful woman in my neighborhood accidentally declared war on the one person who could destroy her. I'm Edward Thornfield, 48, police chief of Willowbrook Falls, Ohio. But nobody in Riverside Meadows HOA knew that. After my divorce went nuclear and left me needing a fresh start, I inherited Grandma's modest house in this 22-home community. Perfect place to disappear, heal, and just be a normal guy for once. Crunch of October leaves under my work boots as I carried boxes up the front steps. Scent of wood smoke mixing with diesel exhaust from my pickup truck. All I wanted was peace, quiet, and neighbors who didn't know my every professional move. Enter Cordelia Brightwater. Picture suburban Hitler in designer yoga pants. 52 years old, bleach blonde hair that could blind aircraft, married to City Councilman Raymond Brightwater. HOA, president for 8 straight terms, because nobody dared run against her. She lived in the neighborhood's mansion, drove a BMW worth more than most people's annual salary, and ruled our little community like her personal fiefdom. Day 5 of peaceful anonymity, I wake up to this, a $500 citation slapped on my windshield. My crime? Unauthorized commercial vehicle. My truck weighs 6,800 pounds. The covenant allows vehicles under 8,000 pounds. Math isn't hard, right? Wrong. According to Cordelia, my emergency radio, barely visible through the back window, made my truck commercial appearing and therefore banned. Texture of that citation paper between my fingers, cheap, flimsy, just like her legal reasoning. The appeal hearing? Scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, when every working person would be, working. That's when Elder Henderson leaned over our shared fence. Vietnam vet, sharp eyes, voice like gravel. Son, you got military bearing. She can smell authority from a mile away, and she's going to make your life hell until you break or move. Turns out Henderson was right. Cordelia had a system. Identify residents with law enforcement, military, or authority backgrounds, then systematically harass them until they fled. She was terrified of anyone who might actually know their rights. Down the street, the Kowalski family, young parents, 2 elementary school kids, they'd been bled dry. $1,200 in fines over 6 months. Their violations? Children's bicycles visible from the street, Halloween decorations up 3 days too long, and grass measured at 2.7 inches when the limit was 2.5. Sound of Cordelia's designer heels clicking on sidewalks during her nightly inspection patrols became the neighborhood's soundtrack of dread. She'd circle like a shark, camera phone ready, measuring tape in her purse, looking for any excuse to fine, harass, or intimidate. Here's the beautiful irony. While she was targeting me as another blue-collar victim, every single one of her police reports was crossing my desk at the station. 47 calls in 18 months. Suspicious activity. Noise complaints. Aggressive residents. I'd been unknowingly reviewing her abuse of my own department for years. But I couldn't reveal my identity. Not yet. Because what I was seeing wasn't just Karen-level HOA overreach. It was genuine corruption. City officials using government resources for personal vendettas. My own officers being manipulated into harassing law-abiding citizens. A whole network of people who'd forgotten they worked for us, not the other way around. So I played along. Quiet divorced guy, keeps to himself, pays his bills, all while documenting every abuse of power, every misuse of authority, every time they weaponized government against their own neighbors. The second citation came week 2, $200 for failure to attend mandatory hearing, the one scheduled when I was literally running the police department. Then $150 for unkempt landscaping. My grass was 2.8 inches. I measured. Henderson caught me measuring one evening, chuckled. She's got no idea who she's messing with, does she? He was right. Cordelia thought she'd found her next easy target, some broke divorcee she could bully into submission. What she'd actually done was pick a fight with the one person who had the authority, resources, and motivation to expose her entire corrupt empire. Week 2 brought Cordelia's first real power play, and it was a masterclass in petty tyranny with a government twist. 6 a.m. Saturday morning. I'm dead asleep after pulling a double shift dealing with a domestic violence case when bang, bang, bang on my front door. Not a knock. A full-on police-style door assault that had me reaching for my service weapon before I remembered I was supposed to be just another civilian target. Surprise wellness check. Cordelia's voice could strip paint off a patrol car. She's standing on my porch in full Karen battle gear, clipboard, measuring tape, camera, and that nuclear sweet smile that screams, "I'm about to ruin your day." Behind her stands some nervous city inspector clutching a tablet like it might save his soul. Concerned neighbors reported suspicious late-night activity, she announced with the theatrical flair of someone who'd clearly rehearsed this moment in her bathroom mirror. Suspicious activity, right. I'd been coming home at midnight after emergency calls, parking in my own driveway, walking to my own front door. In Cordelia's twisted world, that apparently constitutes domestic terrorism. The metallic taste of exhausted rage filled my mouth as I watched her circle my property like a designer-dressed vulture. 20 minutes of theatrical measuring and photographing later. $200 fine for exterior lighting disturbance. My motion sensor security light had triggered when I came home from keeping their neighborhood safe. Another $150 for unkempt landscaping. Grass measured at 2.8 inches when the HOA limit was 2.5 inches. That's when my police training kicked in. Something felt wrong about this inspector's presence. City code enforcement doesn't do Saturday morning house calls for HOA complaints. Ever. I'd signed enough overtime authorizations to know their schedule by heart. These violations represent a pattern of disregard for community standards, Cordelia declared, writing tickets with the flourish of someone who definitely practiced this power trip. The HOA board takes neighborhood quality very seriously. After they left, I made one simple phone call to City Hall. The clerk's voice got nervous, evasive. Well, the HOA president did request enhanced city inspector availability for quality of life enforcement in the Riverside Meadows district. That's when the beautiful truth hit me. Cordelia hadn't just been filing complaints, she'd been coordinating with city officials to create her own private enforcement army using taxpayer resources. She'd essentially privatized code enforcement for her personal vendetta campaign. Sound of papers rustling as I pulled dispatch records that night, cross-referencing every HOA-related call in our system. The pattern was stunning and completely illegal. Cordelia's complaints got same-day inspector response while regular citizens waited 2 weeks minimum. 0 neighbor complaints about suspicious activity at my address. She'd invented concerned citizens out of thin air. Years of reading police reports had taught me something most residents never learn. Municipal ordinances always supersede HOA covenants, unless City Council specifically approves them through proper legal channels. Most HOA violations are legally meaningless theater designed to intimidate people who don't know better. Cordelia was counting on my ignorance, but she'd picked the wrong guy to gaslight. I filed a formal ethics complaint documenting the misuse of inspector resources. 24 hours later, Cordelia got a very uncomfortable phone call from the city attorney's office. Her emergency Thursday night HOA meeting was pure damage control theater. Scent of stale coffee and fear hung in the community center basement as 15 residents gathered for what she'd billed as urgent community safety discussion. "We have a hostile resident who refuses to comply with basic neighborhood standards," she announced, not mentioning my name but staring at me like I'd personally murdered her poodle. "This individual has filed frivolous complaints against your elected HOA board." Henderson's gruff voice cut through the tension. "Frivolous complaints about what exactly, Cordelia?" "Harassment through excessive inspections in coordination with city officials for preferential treatment," I said calmly, watching her face cycle through shades of rage like a broken traffic light. "You have no authority to question this board," she shrieked. "Actually, as a resident and taxpayer, I have every right to ensure government resources aren't being abused for personal vendettas." The weight of my hidden badge pressed against my chest as I balanced playing victim against my duty as the law enforcement official she was unknowingly trying to corrupt. Her proposed background check requirement for all residents failed 8-7. Too close for comfort, but Henderson and the Kowalskis held the line. The next morning brought a legal threat from Brightwater Legal Services, hubby Raymond's firm, demanding I cease harassment of elected officials. Each threatening letter was another federal crime they were documenting in writing, building the case that would eventually destroy them both. Texture of expensive letterhead between my fingers as I read their empty threats. They had no idea they were picking a fight with someone who'd been documenting their every abuse of power from inside the very system they were trying to weaponize against me. But Cordelia was just getting warmed up. Month 2 brought the moment I realized I wasn't just fighting a crazy HOA president. I was uncovering a corruption network that had infected my own police department. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. I'm reviewing overnight incident reports with my coffee when one file makes me nearly spit caffeine across my desk. Formal complaint requesting full criminal background investigation on Edward Thornfield, suspected criminal surveilling Riverside Meadows neighborhood. I was literally reading a police report demanding I investigate myself. The surreal taste of station coffee turning bitter as I absorbed Cordelia's 3-page masterpiece. According to her detailed statement, I was casing homes during irregular hours, possessed law enforcement equipment suggesting criminal background, and exhibited surveillance knowledge that terrorized multiple residents. She wasn't wrong about the law enforcement equipment and surveillance knowledge. She just had no clue why I had them. The complaint had automatically been assigned to me because, well, I'm the police chief. Cordelia was demanding the head of police investigate the head of police for the crime of being the head of police. The irony was so thick you could arrest it for loitering. Sound of file cabinets slamming as I pulled every HOA-related call from our database. The pattern was worse than I'd imagined. 73 complaints from Cordelia in 3 years, 89% unfounded, but with response times that made my blood boil. Her calls averaged 23-minute response. Everyone else? 47 minutes. My own department had been corrupted into giving her private security service. That afternoon brought an unexpected confession. Dale Murphy, a nervous private investigator who looked like he'd rather be investigating insurance fraud, knocked on my door. Mr. Thornfield, I was hired to run a background check on you and, well, you should probably see this. He handed me a folder like it contained nuclear launch codes. Cordelia had paid him $2,400 to dig up dirt. Murphy's report was accidentally hilarious. Subject demonstrates advanced law enforcement training, maintains professional-grade security systems, and exhibits operational security consistent with current federal agent or police leadership. Recommend client avoid all confrontation. Subject appears highly dangerous if provoked. Texture of the investigative photos Murphy had taken. Me leaving for work in civilian clothes, my truck, my house. Professional surveillance of a guy who literally ran the department that would investigate surveillance complaints. Your HOA president thinks you're some kind of criminal mastermind, Murphy confessed. I told her you're clearly law enforcement, probably high level. She accused me of being bribed and demanded I find evidence you're dealing drugs or running a scam. Here's where the mini twist hit. Murphy revealed that Raymond Brightwater had been pressuring the police department for years, using budget threats to ensure priority HOA support. My predecessor had quietly agreed to treat Cordelia's complaints like emergency calls to avoid political problems. I'd inherited a department that had been slowly corrupted into private security for the Brightwater political empire. That evening's confrontation was pure theater. Cordelia ambushed me at my mailbox, PI report clutched like a smoking gun, scent of her chemical perfume mixing with autumn air as she invaded my personal space. I know exactly what you are, she announced with the confidence of someone who thought she'd cracked the Da Vinci Code. Dirty ex-cop, probably federal, definitely hiding major crimes. That's why you're obsessed with HOA business. You're planning to rob us or worse. Weight of my concealed recorder capturing every word as she essentially accused the police chief of planning to commit crimes against the community he'd sworn to protect. Ma'am, I just want to live quietly and follow the rules, I said with practiced calm that probably looked suspicious to someone this paranoid. Following the rules? She laughed like a hyena with a law degree. You questioned our authority. You filed complaints against city officials. That's reconnaissance, not compliance. The next morning escalated beyond HOA drama into pure government corruption. Raymond Brightwater showed up at my door in full politician mode. Expensive suit, fake smile, and the kind of veiled threats that make federal prosecutors salivate. Marcus, my wife has concerns about neighborhood security. Perhaps we could discuss your situation and reach an understanding that benefits everyone. Translation: join our corruption or face the consequences. Sound of my front door creaking as I stepped onto the porch, positioning myself where my security camera would catch every word. I appreciate the concern, Councilman, but I'm just trying to be a good neighbor. His smile turned predatory. The thing is, being a good neighbor sometimes means being cooperative with community leadership initiatives. People who fight the system tend to find the system fights back. There it was, a sitting city councilman threatening a resident for exercising legal rights, recorded in high definition, with federal crimes committed so casually he might as well have been ordering coffee. That night, reviewing the audio in my home office, I realized the scope of what I'd discovered. This wasn't neighborhood drama. It was systematic abuse of government power to control demographics and silence opposition through intimidation. But they'd made one fatal error. They'd targeted the one person with both the authority to investigate them and the motivation to see justice served. Month 3 was when Cordelia crossed the line from harassment into felony territory and accidentally created the evidence that would destroy her entire criminal empire. Wednesday morning started with a scene that looked like a hate crime. I walked outside to find my truck transformed into a monument to psychological warfare. All 4 tires slashed, "Cop Lover," spray painted across the hood in blood-red letters, and my rear window demolished by what had to be a crowbar. Sharp smell of fresh paint mixing with rubber and glass in the crisp October air. The beautiful twisted irony? She'd vandalized the police chief's vehicle with "Cop Lover" without knowing she was attacking the actual cop. Crunch of safety glass under my boots as I photographed the damage with crime scene precision. My security footage showed a figure in dark clothing at 2:17 a.m., body language, height, and rage patterns screaming, "Entitled suburban woman having a complete breakdown." But here's where Cordelia's paranoia reached criminal levels of stupidity. By 9 a.m., she was filing a police report claiming I'd staged the vandalism myself. "Officers, this is obviously a false flag operation," she announced to my own patrol officers with the confidence of someone who'd binged too many conspiracy videos. He damaged his own property to frame innocent neighbors and gain sympathy. I demand he be investigated for insurance fraud, filing false reports, and attempting to incite violence against HOA leadership. Bitter taste of suppressed rage as I watched my own officers professionally document her accusation that their chief had committed crimes against himself. Sergeant Rodriguez caught my eye briefly. He recognized the address and knew exactly whose house this was. That evening brought the confrontation that would define this entire war. I'm at the Shell station pumping gas after a 16-hour shift investigating actual crimes, exhausted and just wanting to get home, when Cordelia materialized like a designer-dressed demon with a black credit card. "Take the free gas. Fill it all the way up. That's an order from your HOA president," she commanded, positioning herself between me and my damaged truck like some suburban warlord. Diesel fumes burning my nostrils as I realized this wasn't charity. It was a trap. In her twisted logic, refusing her generosity would prove I was the hostile criminal she'd been claiming I was. Accepting it would establish her dominance and my status as her charity case. "Thanks, but I pay my own way," I said calmly, continuing to pump gas with steady hands while she escalated into full psychotic mode. "You will accept my generosity. Don't you dare disrespect me." Her voice rose to banshee levels, attracting stares from other customers who probably thought they were witnessing a domestic dispute. Here's where the mini twist that would destroy her played out. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, not knowing she was about to call the police chief's department to report the police chief for the crime of refusing free gasoline. 911, emergency at Shell Station on Maple Street. Violent criminal threatening me. This dangerous man is refusing charity and becoming aggressive. Sound of approaching sirens as dispatch coded this as domestic disturbance, aggressive male, possible assault in progress. 3 patrol cars screamed into the lot with lights blazing, responding to what they believed was a legitimate emergency. I stood there calmly, watching my own officers prepare to arrest me based on Cordelia's completely fabricated crisis. The responding team, Sergeant Martinez, Officer Lucy, and Officer Rodriguez, approached with professional caution, not recognizing their chief in civilian clothes under the harsh station lighting. Sir, step away from the vehicle and put your hands where we can see them, Martinez ordered with his hand on his weapon. Cold bite of metal handcuffs as I made the strategic decision to let this play out. As police chief, I could have ended the charade by identifying myself. Instead, I let my own officers arrest me because I realized this was the ultimate evidence of how easily our justice system could be weaponized by any citizen willing to lie convincingly. He threatened to kill me, Cordelia sobbed with Oscar-worthy performance, providing detailed false testimony to officers who didn't know they were being used as weapons in a personal vendetta. He said he knows where I live and what car I drive. Complete fabrication. I'd said exactly 7 words, thanks, but I pay my own way. Texture of patrol car seats I'd personally approved the purchase of as they transported me to the jail I managed. The irony was so complete it was almost beautiful, the police chief being arrested by his own department based on perjured testimony from a woman who had no idea she was committing felonies against the one person guaranteed to prosecute them. 6 hours later, during booking at my own facility, Desk Sergeant Wilson did a double take. "Chief Thornfield? What in the hell?" "Complete media blackout," I ordered quietly. "This is part of an ongoing investigation. Process this arrest exactly like any other." Because that's what it was. Evidence that our entire system could be manipulated by any sociopath willing to commit perjury with enough conviction. Cordelia had just provided a masterclass in how to weaponize law enforcement for personal vendettas. She thought she'd finally won, finally proven I was the dangerous criminal she'd convinced herself I was. What she'd actually done was commit multiple federal felonies against the one person with the authority and motivation to ensure she faced consequences for every single one. The morning after spending 6 hours in my own jail, I discovered something that turned this from personal revenge into a federal crusade for justice, and it wasn't what I expected. Bitter taste of station coffee at 5 a.m. as I sat in my locked office, federal evidence files spread across my desk like pieces of a nightmare I'd been living blind. What started as investigating HOA embezzlement had revealed something that made my hands shake with both rage and determination. They'd known I was a cop from day one, not police chief. That nuclear revelation was still my ace in the hole, but Raymond's private emails, obtained through emergency federal warrant, contained a thread that froze my blood. Target confirmed law enforcement background, likely federal level. Recommend immediate neutralization through systematic harassment and arrest record establishment before subject identifies scope of operation. Sound of manila folders hitting my desk as the full scope crashed over me. The gas station incident wasn't Karen rage. It was a calculated hit job on my credibility, choreographed weeks in advance by people who'd done this before. The email chain between Raymond, Cordelia, and Jay Morrison revealed to be Judge Janet Morrison, who'd been signing their bogus warrants, laid out a playbook that made me physically sick. Once arrest record established and community credibility destroyed, proceed with standard relocation protocols. Previous subjects averaged 73 days from arrest to property sale. Metallic scent of fear sweat soaking my uniform as I realized the horrible truth. This wasn't my story. I was just victim number 8 in a systematic operation that had already destroyed 7 other lives. The case files spread before me read like a horror movie. Agent Frank Lucy, retired FBI, targeted after questioning no-bid city contracts, harassed until his PTSD resurged and he fled to Arizona. Prosecutor Maria Santos challenged HOA finances, framed for domestic violence, lost her legal license and house. IRS investigator David Kim noticed property tax irregularities, buried under $47,000 in bogus code violations until bankruptcy forced his sale. Weight of 7 destroyed families pressing on my chest as I understood the scope. They weren't just HOA tyrants, they were specialists in identifying and eliminating anyone with the knowledge to expose systematic government corruption. But here's where my rage transformed into cold, calculated justice. The financial records revealed they'd stolen $2.3 million in taxpayer money through a network so sophisticated it required federal RICO prosecution, municipal contracts to Raymond's shell companies, HOA funds to Cordelia's relatives, police overtime inflated through fake emergency responses, property sales forced through harassment, then flipped to Brightwater investors at massive profits. Texture of dispatch logs crumbling between my fingers as I traced how they'd weaponized my own department. Every call from Cordelia got immediate response. Every resident who challenged them faced sudden police harassment for manufactured violations. 3 years of systematic abuse of law enforcement resources. My predecessor hadn't been corrupt, just willfully blind to how they were turning police into private enforcers for their criminal enterprise. The beautiful, terrible irony that would destroy them? They'd made one catastrophic error in victim selection. Sound of encrypted phone buzzing as FBI Special Agent Patricia Lucy delivered news that changed everything. Chief, based on your evidence package, DOJ is authorizing full RICO prosecution. The Attorney General wants this as a flagship case for government corruption enforcement. RICO, 20-year mandatory minimums, complete asset forfeiture, the nuclear option reserved for organized crime families and corrupt government networks. Scent of fresh warrant ink as I signed authorizations for wiretaps that would record every conversation, financial forensics that would trace every stolen dollar, and surveillance operations that would document every crime they thought they'd gotten away with. They believed they'd neutralize their law enforcement problem through that gas station arrest. What they'd actually done was escalate a harassment case into federal conspiracy charges against the one person who could orchestrate their complete destruction. The most beautiful part? They still thought they were winning, but their executioner was already sharpening the blade. Building a federal RICO case while your targets think they've already won requires the kind of strategic deception I hadn't used since undercover narcotics work. But this time, it was personal, and I had the entire federal government backing my play. Sound of shredders working overtime echoed from Cordelia's house as she tried to destroy evidence she didn't know we'd already copied. Meanwhile, in my home office, whir of encrypted drives backing up $2.3 million worth of documented federal crimes to servers she couldn't touch. FBI Special Agent Patricia Lucy looked like a soccer mom but investigated organized crime with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Chief, we're treating this as a flagship case for government corruption prosecution. Full federal resources, RICO charges, and enough evidence to make prosecutors fight over who gets to try it. Metallic taste of anticipation as she outlined the multi-agency task force forming around my accidental discovery. Financial Crimes Division tracing stolen money, Civil Rights Division handling systematic harassment, Public Corruption Unit prosecuting the government officials. My job? Keep playing broken resident while they buried themselves deeper. The Community Intelligence Network required careful recruitment. Henderson had been giving me suspicious looks for weeks. His FBI training made him sensitive to the kind of operational security I couldn't quite hide. Scent of fresh coffee and old secrets during our fence line conversation where I finally took the calculated risk. Elder, I need to tell you something that stays classified until this is over. I'm not just some divorced guy getting picked on by the HOA. His weathered face lit up like Christmas morning. Hot damn, I knew you had federal written all over you. Military bearing, operational discipline, and way too calm under fire. What do you need and how do we destroy these bastards? Henderson became my neighborhood reconnaissance, documenting harassment patterns with military precision while I built the federal case. Watching him methodically photograph every HOA violation, every suspicious visitor to the Brightwater house, every coordination meeting between city officials was like watching a master craftsman work. Texture of recording equipment being fitted by FBI tech specialists who made James Bond's gadgets look like children's toys. Every conversation with Cordelia, Raymond, or their criminal network would be captured in court-admissible digital quality. The irony was poetry. They'd tried to destroy my credibility through false arrest. Now every word they spoke was building their own prison sentences. Maria Santos, investigative journalist whose work had independently identified the same corruption I was prosecuting, agreed to hold her story for maximum impact. Chief, I've been tracking municipal contract irregularities for 18 months. When this breaks, it's going to be national news and a Pulitzer contender. Weight of evidence binders as forensic accountant Dr. Patricia Kim traced money through 17 shell companies with the enthusiasm of someone who lived for complex financial crimes. This network is more sophisticated than most organized crime families, she explained over spreadsheets that looked like abstract art. 3 years of systematic theft, but with RICO multipliers, we're looking at over $7 million in restitution. The beautiful part? My law enforcement background meant I could coordinate every aspect with professional precision that normal residents could never match. Evidence requirements, witness protection, prosecution timelines. I understood the system they'd been abusing well enough to turn it against them with devastating effectiveness. Sound of Henderson chuckling as we planned the final phases. Son, I've been waiting 40 years to see justice catch up with people like this. You're not just taking down neighborhood bullies. You're about to show every corrupt official in America that someone's always watching. Federal prosecutors prepared simultaneous warrant packages for 23 individuals. Not just Cordelia and Raymond, but Judge Morrison, who'd signed illegal warrants, Inspector Davis, who'd provided preferential enforcement, City Attorney Williams, who'd threatened victims, and a whole network of people who'd forgotten government exists to serve citizens. Scent of surveillance van coffee during coordination meetings where FBI agents positioned around our community like pieces on a chessboard. Every meeting, every phone call, every moment when they thought they were operating in secret was being documented by people who specialized in destroying criminal enterprises. The psychological warfare was the most satisfying element. Every day, I played the role of defeated resident, attending their meetings, accepting their harassment, letting them think their gas station arrest had broken my spirit. Meanwhile, federal agents were recording their casual discussions of criminal activities with the kind of evidence that makes prosecutors salivate. Weight of my hidden badge pressing against my chest during HOA meetings where Cordelia celebrated her victory over the troublemaker who'd been taught his place through proper legal channels. If only she knew she was bragging about federal crimes to the police chief who was orchestrating her destruction. Community preparation moved into final phases. Victim services for families traumatized by years of harassment, legal aid for class action lawsuits, new HOA elections with federal oversight, and media coordination to ensure maximum public exposure when justice finally arrived. Texture of warrant papers as I signed final authorizations that would simultaneously arrest 24 people and recover millions in stolen community funds. They thought they were celebrating victory over their latest victim. They were actually planning their crimes at their own going-away party. Month 4 brought the kind of desperation-fueled escalation that happens when criminals realize they're losing but don't know how badly they've already lost. The sabotage started with attempted murder disguised as property maintenance. I woke up to my security system screaming. Someone had tampered with my electrical meter during the night. Not amateur vandalism, but professional sabotage designed to cause a house fire that would look like an accident. Acrid smell of burned wiring mixed with morning fog as I documented what any fire investigator would recognize as arson setup. Metallic taste of pure rage flooded my mouth as I realized they'd tried to kill me in my sleep. Within 2 hours, Cordelia filed an emergency complaint claiming my illegal electrical work threatened the entire neighborhood's safety. The same woman who'd just committed attempted murder was demanding I be arrested for the damage she'd caused. Sound of her voice crackling through FBI surveillance equipment as she coordinated with Inspector Davis. This dangerous criminal is creating fire hazards that could murder innocent families. You need to condemn his house before he kills someone. But here's where their desperation created the mini twist that would complete their federal death sentences. Beverly Mills appeared at my door at 6 a.m., shaking like a leaf and clutching a coffee cup with both hands. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore. They're asking me to lie to federal agents and I think they're planning to hurt you." Weight of her confession as she revealed details that made my blood run cold. Cordelia offered to eliminate my $3,200 HOA debt if I'd tell investigators you threatened to rape and kill me. She had me practice the story for hours, coached me on when to cry, how to make the threat sound believable. Federal witness tampering during active investigation. But it got worse. She said if the feds don't believe the rape threat story, I should tell them you confessed to planning a mass shooting at the next city council meeting. Said you showed me weapons and talked about revenge against government officials. Texture of my recorder switching on as Beverly detailed the most serious criminal conspiracy I'd encountered in 20 years of law enforcement. They weren't just tampering with witnesses, they were planning to frame me for terrorism. "Beverly, why are you telling me this now?" Scent of her fear sweat as she broke down completely. "Because Raymond told Cordelia that if the federal investigation doesn't stop, they'll have to eliminate the problem permanently. They're not just talking about false arrests anymore, Marcus. They're planning something that would make you disappear." The conversation was being recorded by FBI surveillance, naturally, but hearing that a sitting city councilman was discussing murder sent chills down my spine even as it completed our RICO case. Raymond's escalation through official channels had reached psychotic levels. Emergency inspections every 48 hours. Fire department safety checks that lasted 6 hours and found imaginary violations. Building permits mysteriously lost in the system despite electronic filing. Sound of government machinery grinding against me as they weaponized every department they'd corrupted over 3 years. The beautiful part? Each abuse of power was being documented by federal agents who specialized in prosecuting exactly this kind of systematic civil rights violation. But the community retaliation revealed the true scope of their criminal network. Henderson suffered a random tax audit after anonymous tips about unreported military pension income. Maria Santos faced licensing board complaints about her journalism after city officials claimed she was spreading false information about elected leaders. Scent of community fear thick in autumn air as neighbors realized they were caught between federal investigation and local government retaliation. The most chilling development came through FBI wiretaps of their panic coordination. Raymond and Cordelia arguing about containment protocols and permanent solutions. Judge Morrison demanding they neutralize the threat before it reaches Attorney General level. City Attorney Williams refusing calls from people he'd protected for years. Sound of criminals turning on each other as their coordination collapsed and everyone looked for exit strategies. But Cordelia's final mistake would haunt her in federal prison for decades. During a recorded call with Beverly Mills, she crossed from witness tampering into direct terrorism conspiracy. If you can't sell the rape story, tell them he's planning to shoot up City Hall. Say he showed you assault rifles and talked about killing city council members. The FBI will arrest him immediately, and he'll disappear into federal custody where accidents can happen. Weight of complete horror as I realized they weren't just corrupt officials. They were planning to have me killed in federal custody based on manufactured terrorism charges. Every word was recorded by FBI surveillance. Conspiracy to file false federal reports about terrorism threats. Conspiracy to commit murder using federal law enforcement as the weapon. RICO, conspiracy with terrorism enhancements. Life sentences without possibility of parole. Texture of federal warrant papers, as Agent Lucy called, with news that changed everything. Chief, DOJ is authorizing immediate arrests. They tried to weaponize the federal government against a police chief. This is now a national security investigation. They thought they were eliminating a local problem resident who'd gotten too close to their secrets. They were actually committing treason against the police chief who was about to destroy them in the most public, devastating way American justice could deliver. The final month before Judgment Day brought the kind of reckless criminal behavior that happens when sociopaths realize their empire is collapsing and decide to burn everything down rather than surrender. Cordelia's psychological breakdown accelerated into full-blown paranoid schizophrenia mixed with criminal desperation. She started conducting citizens' arrests of neighbors she suspected of being federal informants, physically detaining elderly residents while screaming about government conspiracies and deep state infiltration. Sound of Mrs. Henderson's terrified voice on my porch at midnight. "Marcus, that woman tried to handcuff me. She said I was reporting HOA activities to federal agents and needed to be detained for questioning." The beautiful irony? Cordelia was accidentally correct about federal surveillance. She just had no idea she was the target, not the investigator. Metallic taste of adrenaline as I documented her citizens' arrest attempts while FBI agents recorded evidence of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations that would add another decade to her eventual sentence. But the mini twist that would complete their destruction came from an unexpected source. Judge Morrison panicked and tried to destroy evidence, not knowing FBI had been monitoring her communications for months. Scent of burned paper drifting from the courthouse as Morrison held an after-hours document bonfire, destroying 3 years of illegal warrants, false reports, and coordination records with the Brightwater Network. FBI surveillance captured every moment of the evidence destruction, adding obstruction of justice and tampering with federal investigation to her growing list of felonies. The community crackdown reached police state levels as they abandoned all pretense of legal authority. Raymond used emergency city powers to declare public safety concerns and authorize round-the-clock surveillance of residents who'd supported me. City workers parked outside Henderson's house, photographing visitors and recording license plates. Weight of government oppression crushing the neighborhood as they turned municipal resources into a personal Gestapo operation. Every abuse was being documented by federal agents who now had enough evidence to prosecute them under domestic terrorism statutes. Cordelia's final gambit revealed the true depths of her psychosis. She organized what she called a community protection meeting, essentially a lynch mob disguised as civic engagement. 23 residents summoned to the community center for what her flyer described as final resolution of the criminal threat in our neighborhood. texture of her latest propaganda between my fingers. Mandatory community safety meeting. Evidence will be presented proving resident Edward Thornfield poses imminent danger to families and children. Community vote will determine appropriate protective measures. Henderson's intelligence network revealed the horrifying truth. Cordelia had convinced her most devoted followers that I was planning a mass shooting at the next city council meeting. She'd fabricated evidence, coached witnesses, and was planning to present a case that would justify whatever vigilante justice they decided to implement. Sound of my secure phone buzzing as FBI agent Lucy delivered the news I'd been expecting. "Chief, they're planning to physically attack you at that community meeting. We're moving the arrest timeline up. Tomorrow night during their trial, we take them all down simultaneously." The irony was perfect. They'd scheduled their own arrest party. But Cordelia's breakdown had one final terrifying escalation. Beverly Mills called me at 3 a.m., voice shaking with pure terror. "Marcus, she's completely lost her mind. She's talking about permanent solutions and protecting the community from terrorism. I think she's planning to kill you at that meeting and claim self-defense." Cold weight of mortality settling in my chest as I realized their desperation had evolved into homicidal intent. They'd decided that murdering the police chief was preferable to facing federal prosecution for their crimes. The beautiful part? Every threat, every plan, every moment of their conspiracy was being recorded by federal surveillance that would ensure their convictions on charges carrying life sentences. Scent of autumn night air as I stood on my porch, looking at houses where neighbors lived in fear while criminals who'd forgotten they were public servants planned violence against the community they'd sworn to protect. Raymond's final abuse of power came through an emergency city council resolution declaring me a clear and present danger to public safety and authorizing all necessary measures to protect citizens from imminent violence. A sitting city councilman had just issued what amounted to a death warrant against the police chief, recorded by FBI surveillance and witnessed by federal agents. Sound of Henderson's gruff laughter as he reviewed the federal evidence package that had grown to 2,847 pages. "Son, they've committed every federal crime short of treason. Tomorrow night's going to be the most satisfying arrest operation in law enforcement history." But the most chilling revelation came from wiretapped conversations between Cordelia and Raymond planning what they called community justice. They'd armed themselves, recruited followers, and planned to eliminate their terrorist threat through vigilante violence disguised as citizen self-defense. Weight of my service weapon heavier than usual as I prepared for what might be the most dangerous undercover operation of my career. Walking into a room full of people planning to kill me, knowing federal backup was positioned around the building, ready to serve justice on criminals who'd terrorized an entire community for years. They thought they were planning the execution of a dangerous criminal who threatened their way of life. They were actually organizing their own arrest party, with the police chief as guest of honor and federal agents providing the entertainment. The community center had never seen a crowd like this. Word of Cordelia's emergency safety meeting had spread through social media, local news, and federal law enforcement channels, creating an audience that would witness the most spectacular takedown in small-town corruption history. Sound of folding chairs scraping against linoleum as 127 residents packed into a room built for 60. Cordelia positioned herself at the head table like a prosecutor, flanked by Raymond and their remaining supporters. FBI surveillance vans surrounded the building, agents positioned at every exit, federal prosecutors watching live feeds from mobile command centers. Scent of fear and anticipation thick in overheated air as I entered wearing the same civilian clothes I'd worn for months, playing the role of defeated resident one final time. Cordelia's eyes lit up with predatory satisfaction. She thought she was finally going to destroy the man who dared challenge her authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began with theatrical flair, "we're here to address the terrorist threat living among us. Edward Thornfield has been planning violence against our community, and tonight we present evidence that demands immediate action." Weight of my hidden recording equipment capturing every word as she launched into a presentation that would add perjury and conspiracy charges to her federal indictment. Photos of my house, claims about weapons stockpiles, fabricated witness statements about threats I'd never made. This dangerous criminal has been surveilling our families, planning attacks on city officials, and coordinating with anti-government extremists, she declared, pointing at me with the righteousness of someone who believed her own lies. Henderson shifted in his chair, catching my eye with the slightest nod. Beverly Mills sat in the front row, pale but determined to tell the truth when the moment came. Maria Santos positioned her camera for maximum coverage of what was about to unfold. Furthermore, Raymond stood to add government authority to their lynch mob. The city council has declared Mr. Thornfield a clear and present danger. We're here to vote on community protection measures that will ensure everyone's safety. That's when I stood up, every eye in the room turning toward me as I walked calmly to the front of the room. Texture of my badge as I pulled it from my jacket and placed it on the table where everyone could see. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Police Chief Edward Thornfield, and for the past 4 months, I've been conducting an undercover federal investigation into systematic corruption, embezzlement, and civil rights violations committed by the people you see at this table. Stunned silence crashed over the room like a physical force. Cordelia's face went through every stage of grief in 5 seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, the rage of someone who just realized she'd been played by a master. "You can't! This is entrapment! This is illegal surveillance!" she shrieked, lunging for the evidence binders on the table. That's when FBI Special Agent Patricia Lucy stepped through the main doors, flanked by a dozen federal agents in full tactical gear. "Nobody move! This is a federal operation!" Sound of doors slamming as agents secured every exit while I continued my presentation, projecting financial records showing $2.3 million in stolen taxpayer funds onto the wall behind me. "Mrs. Brightwater, Mr. Brightwater, you've been under federal surveillance for 6 months. Every conversation, every bribe, every abuse of government power has been recorded and will be used in your prosecution for RICO conspiracy, civil rights violations, and domestic terrorism." The mic drop moment came when I played the audio recording of Cordelia planning to frame me for terrorism while arranging my murder in federal custody. "Tell them he's planning to shoot up City Hall. Say he showed you assault rifles. The FBI will arrest him immediately, and he'll disappear into federal custody where accidents can happen." Sound of handcuffs clicking as Agent Lucy read charges while news cameras rolled. "Cordelia Brightwater, Raymond Brightwater, you're under arrest for conspiracy, embezzlement, civil rights violations, witness tampering, and domestic terrorism. You have the right to remain silent." But Cordelia wasn't finished destroying herself. As agents led her away in handcuffs, she screamed loud enough for every camera to record. "This is persecution. We were protecting the community from criminals like him. You'll all regret this when he murders your families." Weight of complete vindication as the community that had watched me be terrorized for months erupted in applause. Henderson's weathered voice cut through the chaos. "About damn time justice caught up with these criminals." Beverly Mills stood up, tears streaming. "I'm sorry I almost let her make me lie about you. Thank you for stopping them before they destroyed more lives." While Maria Santos broadcast the arrests live as federal agents led away 23 members of the corruption network, including Judge Morrison, Inspector Davis, and City Attorney Williams. The largest public corruption bust in Ohio history, centered around the police chief who'd gone undercover in his own neighborhood to serve justice. Texture of evidence files as prosecutors announced they'd recovered $2.3 million in stolen funds, identified 7 families targeted for systematic harassment, and gathered enough evidence to ensure life sentences for the ringleaders. The woman who'd called the police on me for refusing free gas had just been arrested by her own police chief for terrorism conspiracy. Poetic justice had never been more perfectly served. 2 years later, justice had been served with the kind of thoroughness that makes federal prosecutors write case studies and communities believe in the system again. Morning sunlight streaming through my office windows as I read the final sentencing reports. Cordelia Brightwater, 15 years federal prison, $2.8 million restitution, permanent ban from any HOA or municipal position. Raymond Brightwater, 12 years prison, loss of all pension benefits, barred from holding public office. Judge Morrison, 8 years for obstruction and conspiracy. The entire corruption network dismantled with surgical precision. But the real victory wasn't in the prison sentences. It was in what we built from the ashes of their criminal empire. The Riverside Meadows Community Foundation now manages the recovered funds, plus federal grants totaling $4.7 million for neighborhood improvements they'd prevented through years of embezzlement. The new community center built with stolen money returned to its rightful owner stands as a monument to what happens when corruption faces justice. Sound of children laughing from the playground constructed where Cordelia once measured grass with rulers, terrorizing families for imaginary violations. The Henderson Memorial Garden, honoring our Vietnam vet who helped expose their crimes, provides fresh vegetables for elderly residents and teaches local kids about growing food and growing character. Personal healing came slowly but completely. Attorney Jessica Blackwood, who'd prosecuted the civil rights violations, became much more than a professional colleague. Scent of coffee and contentment during our morning conversations on the porch of the house that had once been under siege, now surrounded by neighbors who'd become genuine friends. The Maria Santos Investigative Journalism Scholarship sends one local high school graduate to journalism school annually, ensuring someone's always watching for the kind of corruption we'd destroyed. Maria's Pulitzer Prize for her coverage of our case brought national attention to HOA abuse and government corruption at the local level. Weight of genuine community in ways I'd never experienced before. Henderson and I still play chess every Thursday, though his moves are sharper now that he doesn't have to worry about government retaliation for defending neighbors. The Kowalski kids visit my workshop regularly, learning basic electrical skills and listening to stories about justice, integrity, and standing up to bullies with badges. Beverly Mills became one of my closest friends after her courage in exposing the witness tampering plot. She now manages victim services for the county, helping other communities identify and report government corruption before it destroys lives like it almost destroyed ours. The ripple effects reached far beyond our neighborhood. The Thornfield Protocols are now federal guidelines for investigating government HOA corruption networks. I've testified before Congress twice, consulted on similar cases in 23 states, and helped train federal agents in recognizing the warning signs of systematic civil rights violations disguised as community improvement. Texture of commendation letters from the Attorney General, FBI Director, and 3 governors thanking me for proving that justice still works when good people refuse to stay silent in the face of corruption. But the most satisfying transformation was watching our neighborhood become what HOAs are supposed to create: genuine community. New HOA President Maria Kowalski runs monthly potluck dinners where we actually discuss community improvements instead of manufacturing reasons to fine each other. Property values increased 23% after the corruption removal. Turns out people pay premium prices to live where government serves citizens instead of terrorizing them. The annual Transparency Day celebration brings together all 7 families who'd been targeted by the Brightwater Network. We share stories, support each other's healing, and remind ourselves that ordinary people can defeat corruption when they stand together and refuse to be intimidated. Sound of neighborhood children playing freely in yards where parents once feared HOA retaliation for letting kids be kids. The community pool, built with recovered embezzlement funds, hosts swimming lessons for low-income families, the opposite of everything Cordelia and Raymond represented. Professional satisfaction came through establishing the Public Corruption Task Force that's identified and prosecuted similar networks in 47 municipalities across the Midwest. What started as personal revenge became a blueprint for communities fighting systematic abuse of government power. Scent of barbecue smoke and genuine friendship during block parties where neighbors who once lived in fear now celebrate the community we built together after defeating the criminals who'd held us hostage. Every evening, walking past the Memorial Garden where Henderson's military medals are displayed alongside photos of all 7 families who survived the Brightwater reign of terror, I'm reminded that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about healing, building, and ensuring it never happens again.
Edward Thornfield's story proves something powerful. When you know the system better than the people trying to corrupt it, justice becomes inevitable. What makes this case extraordinary isn't just the $2.3 million recovered or Cordelia's 15-year sentence. It's that Edward refused to be another victim. When she was playing dictator with her measuring tape, he was building a federal case that's now talked to FBI agents nationwide as the Thornfield Protocol. The beautiful part, he won by staying calm, documenting everything, and letting them destroy themselves on tape. No drama, no revenge fantasies, just methodical justice. We all deal with petty tyrants who think authority makes them untouchable. HOA presidents, corrupt inspectors, power-hungry bosses. They all count on the same thing, your silence. Edwards proved that temporary pain for permanent justice is the way worth this. So here's my question. What's corrupt authority bringing in your neighborhood needs a reality check? Drop your story below. City, stage, details. The crazier the power trip, the better. Hit subscribe if you believe good people shouldn't have to suffer in silence, because every week we're proving that justice isn't dead. It's just waiting for someone brave enough to serve it. Remember, they're counting on your compliance. Don't give them that satisfaction.